I'm Rob Lucuria from Awards Heaven, and I'm here with production sound mixer extraordinaire, Simon Hayes, who's here to talk to me about Wicked for Good. Simon, welcome to the pod.
Hey Rob, how are you today?
Yeah, not bad at all. We have so much to talk about because, first of all, congratulations on Wicked for Good making the Oscar shortlist for sound. That's very exciting.
It's super exciting. You know, we attended the Bake Off in London at Dolby Europe this weekend. There's so many great movies for sound, right? The Bake Off, you get 10 minutes, and each movie does a 10-minute clip of whatever they think best represents their movie. And I've got to tell you, I sat in that theatre and listened to 10 almost perfect clips. You know, it's just each one of them so deserving, so creative, real, and each film is really an ambassador for our craft. So it's a tough year.
I've always wanted to attend one of those bake-offs. One day I will. That looks like so interesting because you really get to see the pinnacle of what's going on in the industry at the moment and all the artistry. And is it humbling? Like, how do you feel in that room when you're watching and listening to all of that amazing work?
It just feels like me and all of my colleagues in post production and production are just pushing forward a little bit every year, doing something a little bit new, using Dolby Atmos a little bit more in a really exciting and creative way. But most of all, Rob, the support in that room is amazing. After everyone's clip, the whole room applauds. You know, we have a great sort of meet and greet beforehand. We talk afterwards, and it's just as production sound mixers, certainly we don't get a chance to meet other production sound mixers very often because we're never on the same movie. So it's like a great meetup, and it's just a very supportive place.
Sounds very, very exciting. So, given that awards attention often gravitates towards scale and volume, what do you think the Academy is responding to in the sound for Wicked for Good in particular?
I think Wicked for Good is particularly different because not only are we using that Dolby Atmos sound system and really creating a soundscape, a complete design around the movie and supporting all of the visual imagery. But what we're also doing is we're supporting original singing performances. Now, that's the thing. When you have the very pinnacle of sound design that my colleagues in Sound Post managed to work around those original performances, but you're also retaining that singing, that dialogue, every single breath, every single tear as those girls are breaking up. What you're doing is you're basically creating a fantasy world for the audience that they can believe. And that's what we wanted to do. And that's not just about sound, Rob. That's also about set design. It's also about costume. And, you know, I'm sure that you've noticed we didn't do a whole bunch of blue screen or green screen. What we wanted to do with Nathan Crowley's set design, John Chu's vision, was basically build huge sets so the audience bought the fact that they are in the world of Oz. And they're not looking at something that is completely CGI'd. Because, of course, you're going to have to use CGI for the flying monkeys, but what we wanted to do was to use it sparingly. And anything that could be real, we wanted it to be real. And, of course, that brings me back to the sound. If we can make every single breath, every single lip smack as someone's about to start crying, every single word of the dialogue, and, of course, every single sung piece as live as possible. And what I can tell you is that all of the solo vocals were live. Yes, we did some re-recording on the group choruses to support those fantastic live vocals, but whenever someone's singing alone, whether it's Cynthia, Jeff, Ari, Michelle, it's all live. What that gives the cast, it's not just about saying, hey, we recorded this live. It's about them being able to instinctively perform in the manner that they feel is appropriate with the rest of the cast around them. So, for instance, when Ari is looking into Cynthia's eyes, she can perform however she wants. If we're playing her a pre-recorded playback track, She's already locked into her performance with whatever decisions she made in a pre-recording music studio 4 months before we started shooting. So that goes as far as the fact that we mostly threw away the pre-recorded music as well, because the pre-recorded music locks our cast into a tempo. They have to perform on a given beat, and it doesn't matter that they're singing live. If they're being dictated to by a pre-recorded bit of music, that's taking away their instinctive ability to act in the moment with whoever's around them in the scene. And so by throwing away that pre-recorded music and having them just accompanied very, very gently and sensitively by a keyboard in their in-ear monitors, what it basically allowed them to do was to make decisions in the moment. And the best way I can describe that, Rob, is the same decisions that they could make on a Broadway stage. Because, of course, on a Broadway stage, they're being supported by an orchestra pit. That orchestra pit isn't a pre-recorded piece of music. They are playing with the performance on stage in front of them, which gives those actors complete and utter freedom. That's what we had on Wicked for Good. Ari and Cynthia had complete and utter freedom to take a moment, take a breath, think about something. And on the song For Good, at the beginning, they're kind of weaving in and out of dialogue and singing. Every single take was different. Cynthia would sing a line on the first take, and the next take she'd say it. It would be a spoken bit of dialogue. And that was the freedom that was given. And she was making those choices based on how she felt looking at Ari, and the same vice versa. And so that's what we really did. We gave these actors complete and utter freedom to make decisions, and then built up this fantastic Dolby Atmos sound design around these expressive choices that they made with the way that they were going to perform.
But so that's so fascinating because like what does that level of interpretive freedom demand from you and your team? Like how do you design a sound workflow that can survive that kind of moment to moment unpredictability? Because it's so dangerous. It could all go completely pear-shaped, right?
You're absolutely right. And it could go completely pear-shaped. And, the thing about doing something different on a movie set is you have to take risks. The reason why we are potentially locked into certain ways of working on movie sets, one of them being using pre-records on musicals, so you have that difficult transition from spoken dialogue and, whoa, here's the lip sync, they're all singing now and we know they're lip syncing, is because it's safe. There's no risks being taken. The picture editor can cut however he wants to do. The moment you start playing with tempo, you are presenting a whole load of difficult choices for Myron Kirstein, our picture editor, for Jack Dolman, our music supervisor. They have to get me out of the trouble that I've caused by giving Cynthia and Ari this complete freedom. And one of our secret weapons was when Ben Holder, our keyboard player, was accompanying them, he secretly had a click track at the same speed in his ear as the pre-recorded music. So we'd throw away the pre-recorded music, but say, okay, we're at 112 BPM. And that would be Ben's click track in his ear. So that if Cynthia wanted to take a moment, that click track didn't demand that Ben keeps on playing to it. But when she takes a moment, takes that intake of breath and goes to sing again, Ben comes back in at the right BPM of following the click track. Now, I'm not saying it was always perfect. There was times literally where I was watching, because Ben was next to me. We were like our own little orchestra pit. There was me, there was the Pro Tools playback operator, and there was Ben. And we're all there in a line supporting what's going on screen. We've all got our 3 monitors for the 3 cameras, and we're literally kind of hand signaling, and it's really... It's like those swans where they look so graceful as they're floating across the lake, but underneath you've got the feet doing this. And that's what our orchestra pit was like. And a number of times I saw Ben rip out his IEM because he literally couldn't stick to that click track. And then, a bar later, you'd see him, grabbing the cable and bunging it back in. And what we did about that was we were making notes based on our bar numbers the whole time. And we'd send notes off to Myron in the cutting room, which would eventually filter their way through to the post-production music department, saying, okay, we were locked to tempo up until bar 8. We lost tempo from bar 8 to bar 14. On bar 14, we locked back in. And so they knew very much where we had tempo integrity and where we'd gone freedom. And of course, what that means with Myron is it means that, and I'm also sending that click track to Myron on a separate stem, a separate track of my production recording. And Myron would essentially cut to that click. When we went off tempo, he'd make a choice to potentially hold on to that close up until we were tempo locked again, and then he can cut back to something else. So it just basically, it's a different way of working creatively. And then, of course, what you've got, Rob, and this is really funky, and I can't stress enough how important this is. What you've then got is you've got an orchestra, which Stephen Schwartz is conducting in London 6 months later, when the film is cut together, and he is conducting that orchestra as the orchestra are watching the performances on the screen and listening to the girls singing on the screen. So again, what you've got is you've got your heartstrings as a cinema audience member being pulled by an orchestra who are playing to the performance, not two singers who are singing to a pre-recorded orchestra. And so all of this is built up layer upon layer to do one thing, and that's have our audience believe these emotions. And I think that when you watch The Song for Good, certainly, and you look around you in the theatre and you've got people with tears rolling down their cheeks, this is the emotional connection that this workflow enables.
It's the best example because, of course, Cynthia and Ariana deliver. But without the work done by you, the sound team, John Powell, Stephen Schwartz, the musician, like there's so many elements that tug at the heartstrings. And I tell you, I can't even put into words how much that scene, in particular, that sequence, really, I looked around the theatre and everyone was crying. Everybody was, even me. I got a black heart and I was bloody crying, right? So I get it. I totally get it. And what fascinates me, mate, is that if you don't mind me saying, you essentially rewrote the playbook, I think the rule book for vocal capture on Les Mis. You won an Oscar for it, right? Then you pushed it further with Wicked. Then you went again with Wicked for Good. And in between that, you did a Bond movie as well. Like, so, I mean, what I'm trying to get at is how has your methodology evolved over those films? Like, is there much more scope to improve, or do you think that you've really honed this down to the best way to capture this kind of authentic sound?
I think we're pushing forward all of the time, and rather than thinking about how can I evolve, what I'm trying to do as a production sound mixer is make sure that every single movie that I'm hired for, I'm like a chameleon and I can become the best production sound mixer and design the best workflow for that particular movie. And so, for instance, on the film Wicked, we were locked a lot more to tempo because we had to be for the choreography. You need to have the dancers foot tapping in the right place. And so actually we didn't lean nearly so heavily in the film Wicked on the live keyboard. But on Wicked for Good, that was a completely different workflow. Suddenly we're into a far darker, more emotional movie that's about the relationship directly between these two witches. And I think that leaning harder on that live keyboard was absolutely the correct thing to do for that particular movie. And that's what I'm trying to do as a production sound mixer, is just always try and find a way of supporting original performance in a more authentic way, and basically making sure that whether it's dialogue or live singing, we manage to get all of those original performances on the movie set into the movie for our colleagues in Sound Post to build a real soundscape around. Because the more reality we can have, especially as we start to lean more heavily on CGI, and dare I say it in the future, AI, right? Everything that we need to know about what pulls our heartstrings is the human endeavour of an actor. It's about that humanity. It's about about being in a cinema and looking into the eyes of the actor on the screen and believing them. And that is the performance. And within that performance is the sound. The moment we start saying, oh, you know what? Don't worry about that. We've got a huge wind machine on that. Let's re-record that afterwards. That's when we start actually, and we've got a big CGI, for instance, CGI'd set. We've got re-recorded dialogue. That's when audiences, I feel, start to go, not sure if I'm buying that. But I think that if we can stay anchored and make sure that the vocals that are being spoken or sung are real, in the real space, coming out of the actor's mouth on the day that they're playing that part, wearing that costume, holding those props in that moment, then we're going to present to the audience something where they can lose themselves and believe it. And that's what we want to do with films. We want our audience to lose themselves in that theatre, not thinking about their problems yesterday, not thinking about what's going on in their lives tomorrow. We want them to be able to lose themselves in our film for 2.5 hours. And if we can do that, then we're winning.
Yeah. If you can sit in, I mean, that's why you go. You spend your $50, whatever, you buy your popcorn. You don't want to be looking at your phone. You want to lock in. And when a film does that, like this one did, mate, that's magic. I wonder though, do you think, following up on what you've said just now, do you think the industry is genuinely moving towards embracing live, vulnerable performance capture? Or is it still fundamentally more comfortable with control, polish, and safety rather than risk and truth?
I think it depends which directors we're talking about. I think that this is a directorial decision. But what pleases me to tell you, Rob, is I think generally as an industry, we are starting to trust live vocal capture on sets more. And I'm not just talking about singing, I'm talking about dialogue as well. I think that those days of, potentially the late 1990s where a lot was getting looped,
Yeah.
that was for technical reasons. It's because suddenly we started shooting multiple cameras and the sound department hadn't kept up because we hadn't yet gone to multi-tracks, and directors got very used to looping their movies, ADRing their movies, and there was an overhang. But what happened was we started catching up in the sound department. We got multi-track devices, but it took a while for directors to start trusting production sound again. And I think right now we're at certainly at a point where most of the directors that I work with, you don't hear those words, listen, don't worry about it, we'll just loop it. That's very much 15 years ago. Nowadays, I think directors realize that there is true emotional value in an original performance. And I think that directors also realize that the more we support visuals with VFX and CGI, the more we need to anchor those original performances. So I think, even huge superhero movies are protecting those original performances. Those movies that maybe once upon a time back in the day would have been 100% looped, they're not anymore. That's also down to the skills and tenacity of my colleagues in Sound Post across the board in LA, London, New York, in Sydney, Melbourne, wherever. Okay, all of those people in Sound Post are rock stars now. They are really finding ways of saving those original performances, and the ability that they've got technically to use their tools in a creative manner to save those original performances are just getting more and more powerful every year. So from a sound perspective, just across the movie industry, we're in a great place right now. A lot of performances that you're hearing on the screen are those original performances. And I think that that's why we're making such good movies at the moment.
Yeah, so many wonderful movies. And I think on a movie like this, not only is it a musical, it's also a fantasy, and it's an action, and it's genre fluid. But I just wonder then, when I watch like the boom operator, the camera performers, FX, all music, the the sound, supervising sound editor, the remixing recorder, there's so many different elements to what we eventually see and hear in the theater. Do you think that, therefore, that live vocal musicals are the ultimate test of cross-department trust?
I think they certainly are. And I think that what happens on a live musical is that everyone on the movie set has to get on board immediately. And it's like, let me give you an example. When we arrived on Wicked for Good and Wicked, we basically knew that everyone on the movie set was going to need a set of radio headphones because you weren't going to hear any music coming out of any speakers. If you wanted to hear the music, because we needed to have it quiet on the set, Ari Cynthia had their music piped in through IEMs. Of course, John Chu and the producers all had their radio headphones on. That's normal. But we also needed every single grip, every single electrician. They all needed to be able to hear the music because, of course, cue points come from the music on a live musical. And so what happened was we turned up, I think we had 75, 80 sets of radio headphones, and we tried to give them out on the first day. And a lot of the people on the set said, no, I never wear those. Don't worry about it. And they didn't want the radio headphones. And by lunchtime on the first day, suddenly all of the headphones were out because everyone on the crew suddenly realized we're not making a normal movie here. And actually, to be part of what's going on sonically, you've got to put these headphones on because that's where you're going to hear the music, that's where you're going to hear the live keyboard. And if the dolly grip is being told, listen, as soon as the drums come in, 12 seconds into the first take, before Cynthia starts singing, we want the dolly to start moving. Unless they've got headphones on, they're not going to hear that cue. And so suddenly what you've got as a byproduct of that is you've got a whole load of people on the movie set that wouldn't normally pay too much attention to what the sound department are doing because they don't need to, because their job doesn't require it. And thus there could be an element of not trying too hard to help the sound department. Suddenly you've got guys and girls with headphones on who are saying to me, oh my God, I didn't know it could sound like that. This is amazing. And, I've got crane operators coming over and saying, listen, I'm really sorry. I just heard the creak on the track of the crane. We're just going to take a few minutes now between takes and try and get some more wedges in there to stop that creaking because they can hear it all on their own headphones. So on the set, you certainly get this crazy collaboration where everyone understands the sound because for the first time ever, the whole movie set is wearing headphones. But then, of course, as you touched on, we go across to the situation with the post-production. And what I can tell you on Wicked for Good is that there was no demarcation between production sound and post-production sound. We were working together in prep. I was talking to Nancy Nugent Title, Andy Nelson, the re-recording mixer, in prep about exactly what we were going to do on the film set. We were throwing around ideas. I was talking to Andy about what he required, asking Nancy how I should present my tracks. And that carried on through the whole production on Zoom, regular Zoom meetings. And then when they got into post, they're coming back to me and saying, okay, so we've got this scene. You did this and this and this. Why did you do that? How can we make the best use of your tracks? And so It's almost like on a live musical, you've got to have this collaboration right from the get-go. And the other thing that we did, which I try and do on all my musicals, what I noticed when I first started doing musicals as a production sound mixer was there was this weird demarcation between the music department and the production sound department where they didn't work together. Okay, yes, we collaborated, but it wasn't just one team. And from my second musical, I said to the production department, listen, I really want the music and sound department to be seen as one specific entity. If you're sending any emails regarding anything to the music department, please copy in the sound department. Please vice versa. Anything that I send, so basically from the get-go, from an administration point of view, you start to treat sound and music together. And then what I always do on musicals now is I say to whoever is the on-set head of the music department, look, let's work together. We will run our department together. If you need any of my production sound team to do anything on this set, you just tell them, you just ask them to do it and it'll be done. They will treat you as if you're the head of their department because you are. And vice versa. If I need something done by any of your team, I hope that we can have the same reciprocal agreement. And so basically within 1 week of starting shooting, you've got this powerhouse of a department that are truly not just collaborating, but it's one team. And instead of there being 4 members of the production sound team, or on a big film, 5 members of the production sound team, 5 members of the music team, working in different areas of the set, you suddenly got a 10 strong team there to support John Chu, to support Ari, and we can really, almost like you do with a sports team, start to say, okay, how do we play? Who's going to go in which position? How do we play this right with the team that we've got? Rather than all kind of having this weird demarcation. And what I would say is that makes a big, big difference to the way that you can deliver a live musical, is really just putting that music and sound team together and saying, we are all one.
It really surprises me that that is not the typical way. It's just not, because it is very siloed, and there is always a handover or a handoff. And fine, okay, great, I get it. Everyone has their their specialties, but it just surprises me that it's not more like this, where it's more a holistic. Because look what results. The sound in this film is so breathtaking. And I went onto your social media the other day. I was curious to see whether you had anything on there that might have given me some clues as to how you were able to do it. And there's one really great clip that you shared. I'm going to link it in the article to this interview, where Ariana is singing "Girl in the Bubble." I had no idea that there would be so much. It's almost like a ballet. You've got Steadicam, performer, boom. Everyone's dancing on the set to make sure that you're able to capture it so precisely. Talk me through that.
Well, look, there's a relationship here that really needs to be discussed, and that is the relationship between the camera operator and the boom operator, and that on Wicked for Good was extremely, extremely supportive. You know, Carsten, our Steadicam operator, is certainly one of the best Steadicam operators I've ever worked with, one of the best in the world, and Arthur, my boom operator, has done 67 movies with me. We've never done a movie without each other. He joined me on Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels back when we were kids, and we've been together ever since. And so what we've got here is we've got two technicians that singularly are both, right up there in terms of their craft. But you've also got them understanding that they are there to support Ari. And as you say, being able to do this ballet. And what I can tell you is that Carsten was more than happy to have Arthur 1 inch off the edge of the frame. Now, sometimes you'd have Steadicam operators, because they need some freedom as well, okay? They need to be able to, they don't want to boom right there because it's going to restrict their movement. But Carsten and Arthur very soon, within days of starting to work together, Carsten realised that Arthur understood framing, that Arthur understood that when he needed to give some room, to give Carsten the ability to reframe, he would be able to get, and that didn't need to be done, through looks or chat. It's a knowledge of filmmaking, a knowledge of framing, a knowledge of what that shot is going to look like in a cinema. And so what you see in that clip that you've spoken about, and I'm so glad you brought that up, is Arthur absolutely 1 inch off the edge of frame, until there's a moment where, the Steadicam needs to hinge slightly to let Ari walk past it. And then Arthur suddenly gives 4 or 5 inches more room for Carsten. And what you've got is, when you've got two technicians working like that together, for me as a production sound mixer, it means that singing is that little bit richer. It's a little bit more of the quality that you would get in a music recording studio. Because of course, in a music recording studio, you've got the microphone right in front of the mouth like that, and that is how we're accustomed to hear singing. And so the negotiation that I was got, and I was about to say the fight that I've got, but that's the wrong word. The negotiation that I've got on a movie set is that I know that despite the fact we're making a film, I can't have air around those vocals because they sound weird. We are accustomed to all singing, whether it's rock and roll, hip hop, opera, it's all close mic'd, Rob. Right? Whenever we listen to music, whatever our favorite genre is, it's close mic'd. And so if you start to listen to a vocal recorded with a lot of air around it, it doesn't sound right. Okay. So the negotiation I've got on a movie set is that I need these live vocals to be close mic'd, and we need to get in close enough that it mimics the kind of recording quality that you would get in a music recording studio. I want that quality, but what I also want is the immediacy and the truth of the original performance. But that's not to say that I can have a boom working 2.5, 3 foot above the head to give a whole load of safety. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to make sure that the dialogue is also close mic'd so that when we transition, and this is something that Andy Nelson, the re-recording mixer, is, we did Les Miserables together and he taught me an awful lot. And we did Wicked and Wicked for Good together. And this is where he and I really have this collaboration. And our thing is that we don't want there to be any transition between dialogue and singing. We want it to just be the same. That's completely at odds with what we would have with an old school musical, where, as I said before, you kind of go, "Oh, here's the playback." What we want on our live vocal movies is for people to just feel like they're in a room watching someone talking who suddenly starts singing, and that's what we need it to sound like acoustically. And so what I'm trying to do is to make my dialogue sound exactly the same as the singing. And what Andy does, which is almost unheard of in re-recording terms, is he treats the dialogue and the sung lines, the vocal, as exactly the same entity. It sounds simple, but people just don't do it. So when he's pre-mixing the dialogue, he doesn't pre-mix the dialogue and then later on add the live singing to it. He's pre-mixing the dialogue and the live singing on one stem, so that any reverb or any EQ that he adds to the dialogue is also going to get put across the live singing. So again, that helps this whole audience experience of feeling like there is no difference between singing and dialogue. And that again is all part of us just going, okay, this is the performance. It doesn't matter whether it's dialogue or singing, it's the performance.
I have to admit, sometimes when I watch musicals, I'm like, oh, another song. That never happened in the Wicked movies, especially this one. And yeah, I just feel like this is the benchmark now for all musicals. And if they're not going to do it like this, then please don't bother. So final question is this. It's not, so we're not Simon Hayes, the production sound mixer extraordinaire, but just Simon Hayes. When you're on set and you are witnessing these beautiful singers, like the technically precise, emotionally fearless singers like Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, and you're working, do you sometimes stop for a second and just marvel at how beautiful and breathtaking and enchanting these singers are?
Every day. Literally on Wicked for Good every single day. And what I can tell you is the experience that the cinema audiences had when they watched For Good in the theatre, we as a crew had when we were shooting. We shot that in 2 days and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And I'm talking about, big, tough, lamp-wielding film industry electricians, and you can see that they're wiping away tears. I think that and the other thing is with John Chu's sets, John Chu doesn't have a feeling on his set that this is a huge movie, despite the fact it's obviously huge. We've got all of the toys, we've got the biggest sets ever designed. It very much feels like a kind of mid-budget independent movie where everyone knows each other's names. John knows every single person's names on the 200-person, 250-person crew. And you kind of go, this is why I got into this industry, to have this feeling. And also, I kind of go, this is the feeling that I used to have doing low-budget British independent movies, where it really is a feeling of we're all in this together, this is teamwork, and we're all trying to make the best movie possible. But suddenly, that feeling from 20 years ago has been transported onto a huge US studio picture. And that is because of the mood and the feeling that John Chu and Mark Platt create on their movies. We overuse the word collaboration, but it's just like everyone's a member of the team. But on the wider note, every time I'm on a movie set, I feel blessed to be there. And I think to myself, thank God I haven't got a real job. Because I don't feel like, when I'm making a film, I don't feel like it's a real job. I don't feel like I'm toiling. I don't feel like I feel like I'm doing something that is valuable creatively. I feel like I'm doing something that people are going to enjoy, and there is so much job satisfaction from that. That, as I say, it doesn't feel like I'm going to work in the morning. And actually, even when I've been on a really long run on a movie and I need some time off, 2 weeks is enough for me. The moment I've been at home for 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, what's next? And I guess, you know what? I guess it's an addiction, but I need to feel that feeling of being on a movie set around these people and creating these soundscapes for cinema audiences. And finally, what I say is this: I want people to go to the cinema. I want people to be in a dark room and to turn their phone off for 2.5 hours, right? And that's something which, as you know, as a community globally, we are
Yeah.
losing.
Mm.
We don't get the same thing when we're watching it on our sofa at home, because we have that phone next to us. We can stick pause on and take a call. We can, I think that there is something really, really magical and special and unique that we need to save from sitting in a movie theatre and concentrating, and not just concentrating on what's in front of us, but also feeling that collective emotion from the seats and rows around us. Because
Yeah.
that's a sense of community where we all experience this thing in real time together. And that's something that we need to savor, because, right, it's becoming rarer and rarer.
It really is. I hear here. Totally agree with you on that one. Mate, thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations on some really amazing work. I hope you're nominated at the Oscars.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all of your questions. They're such great questions, really well thought out. And it's an honor to speak to you, Rob. Thank you.